Hello there, this is Chris Anderson, CE Sim Golf. I'm talking about water bases, lakes, ponds, and we're going to do a little bit with creeks today. I've done a video on this before. I realized just recently that it didn't work in its entirety, so I'm just going to start over, try and be a little bit more concise on this one. But generally talk about how we can use Blender to what you would refer to as dig out or carve not just bunkers and stuff, but also water, and how we can use advanced modeling techniques, things you would see in my other videos, just Blender skills in general, Blender modeling, to get better control and more unique looks on water edges, things like lakes and creeks. I know that there are some other methods out there. You can use RAM to do general conform. I know that you can use RAM to do general conforming, cutting different profiles into terrain, and then you would conform that in Blender. That works fine. This might give you a way to add more interest and more variety, which, as everyone knows, variety is what I love. It's what creates things that look natural, imperfections. There are some recipes out there now in the new tools from AFROD that show ways to do creeks and things like that, but again, that's very rigid. It's a nice quick way, similar to RAM, just another method, but it doesn't give you the variety that you get like this and things like that. Might be a good starting point, but I'm going to show you how doing it manually this way can be just as fast, if not faster, and probably look better. So don't be afraid to jump in. Lakes are much easier than creeks. We're going to take a look at both. So first thing we're looking at here in Blender is a pond. This will work with pretty much any size. There's a lake on this property as well, but we're just going to start with a pond, nice and easy. What you'll see is you've got your base, you've got your blend, and this is very flat, right? So LiDAR usually bounces off the top of water. That's why we have to dig it. It sees the top of the water as the height map, and that's what we get. But we know that the actual ground under this water is deeper in the real world. So we either dig that out in Unity or we're going to do it here. Now, if you watch my workflow video and stuff, you'll know that I tend to prefer not using very many blend shapes. I combine a lot of shapes. Sometimes I will throw a custom 4 around things to give myself extra loops. What's a loop? You should probably know that already, but that's any of these groups of vertices that go in a line around your mesh. So you can see they loop all the way around. What's good about them? Well, the more you have of them, the better you're going to get for a profile. If you think of it similar to RAM, you're going to get a smoother curve and more interesting looks and control when you make elevation changes. So what I do when I do water bases, sometimes I'll have an extra loop, which would be that custom 4. It's not really that necessary, but I'm always going to combine shapes. I just want one water shape. I simplify meshes quite often this way. So I'll select my blend and my water shape, Control J to join them, and then select all M to merge verts by distance. The first time you merge verts in a file, you're going to want to change that, and then it'll stay at that. So what that's done is created one shape from the two, but I also need to get rid of my blend material over here. It's underneath the material panel. Delete that. Now I just have one shape. Now I'm going to add and spread my loops out a little bit. So I'm going to take this one and G twice to slide it in. And I'm going to slide this, slide like that. I'm going to add at least one for now. I'm just trying to space them out so that when I create a side profile, a dig here, it's a little smoother. Could you have made a recipe to do all that? Sure. But how long would that take, and how fast is it if you just do it that way? I think it's much easier. So this is how easy it is to dig a lake. Select all your verts with the A key, and then deselect, Alt-Shift, deselect at least this loop, maybe 2, by doing Control negative. That's the minimum, right, that you want to deselect, because you don't want these to move. So if I were to move these without proportional on the Z axis, so I hit G to move, here I'll show you, I hit G, then Z to move up and down, it's not going to influence anything else, which is super boring, right? Gives you a straight wall. Could be a nice way to add a quick rock wall, right? Just texture this with rocks and you've got a pretty straight up and down bulkhead or rock wall. But if you want to make it more natural, what you do is actually hide these outer ones. So I'm going to take those two and hide them. I'm not deleting them, just hiding. So now if I move anything else, they won't be affected. So I'm going to take the rest, and then I'm just going to deselect using the negative key till I get towards the middle a little bit. Call that the bottom of my lake. Now when I do this, I'm going to use proportional editing, which will affect verts around it. G and Z, change the size. Can you see my circles, my influence? Now I don't want to influence too much. I'm going to take the rest of those on the outside. And just like that, we've dropped our lake, right? If you want to go deeper, just keep going negative till you get to the middle. And just drop things down like that. So there you've got kind of an interesting shape and an outer like that. Now, if we want to have a really refined edge, like right now, the water isn't going to be able to start till in here because there's no depth here. I was planning for that though. So what I want to do here is go unhide, Alt-H, right? I'm going to go probably with, I think I do want to leave that hidden. And I Control I to do that. Now I turned off my proportional. What you can do is you can just drop that, or you can go in a little bit farther and use a very small proportional editing. Turn it down so it's not affecting the outside ones. And as you can see, make sure you're not pulling any of the exterior verts away. Give yourself a nice little rolled over edge to your pond. And then what you can do is smooth. You could use a smooth to kind of give some, this is very deep and right now, but we could right click and O to smooth like that. Now we probably made that way deeper than any pond on a golf course is, right? But I'm gonna go undo, show you a quicker way to do this with just a nice side. So if we go back to flat, and if we want to do a shallow with just a rolled edge, we are probably going to want to hide these. And we're going to carefully start and do this the opposite way. We have just a little proportional editing. So you can see it just barely influenced that. Then we're going to slowly move out and keep turning our wheel to give a little more editing space. In fact, I'm going to go one more in. And that's probably deep enough for a golf course lake. I'm going to smooth it. If you really want to make the middle just a little deeper, whoops, didn't mean to hide it. You can use the G key and make sure I'm not affecting anything else. Pull that in. Expand, back out, and smooth, right click, O, smooth again. There. Now what I've got is like that. So we've got a quick lake dugout with a pretty pristine, nice kind of sharp edged area. Some areas are going to be steeper than others, and that's because of the spacing. What you can do to make sure you've got a nice smooth round over, you can select kind of this apex edge, the one that's defines kind of your top, and you probably don't want it to be that sharp in those areas, so we're going to bevel it. That's Control B with edge loop selected like that. You can even Control R to add a loop, things like that. And then with how steep this is over here, you could even smooth out vertices just in that area. But those are techniques to quickly dig out a lake in Blender very precisely. If I didn't want this point to have that much depth to it, I don't know why it's so much steeper there, to be honest. I'm not gonna be able to go all the way back, am I? Yes, I am. It looks like it's just because we are a little closer here, right? So if you want to get really granular on this and have some areas that have, like I would imagine this might jut out a little bit here. So if I take away the vertices that I'm going to influence there, this is just an idea, then it's not going to pull those. right? So as I come in here, I'm doing the same thing I did before, just going in and adjusting my depth at different intervals. And then when I go back out and smooth it, it will actually cause a little bit of a, I don't know, in this case what it would be, a mud bar or a sand bar, like, right? Looks like I didn't do it quite as much this time on the edges, so our edges are not as defined. That's pretty easy. We're just going to take away and hide those again. Go in one. We're going to just make sure we're a little bit steeper like that. And now even on that point, things are a little steeper. We're going to go back in. We're going to find our, we're going to slide that one down a little bit. Grab this one and bevel it like I did before to give us a nice rounded over area. And now we have, then now you can see how you can really precisely dig and even leave some areas like that up. Now if you had somewhere in a lake that was really shallow in the middle, or somewhere like that that had, you know, a little area sticking up, a little patch of weeds, something that you needed the weeds to grow somewhere, you could grab anywhere you want in the middle, any of these verts, and you could just increase your influence like this and just pull up a little patch or something like that. And then you'd have a shallower spot in the middle, somewhere you could plant weeds, and they would stick up near the surface of the water. So you could have weeds growing in the middle. Now, what do we do about water planes and things like that? Well, the way to do that in Blender, you could always just add a plane in Unity, but the way I would do it in Blender, even just for reference, is I would take probably, I mean, you could even take the outer loop, because the outer loop of this, is going to be your maximum height, right? So if I duplicate that, Shift D, and use the Z key just to lift it up so you can see it, and I'm going to P to separate. Now if I select this new shape, which is just a bunch of vertices, I select them all, and I hit F, it'll create one big face, right? Essentially, that is a plane that could become water. Now, it won't really matter what you assign it. I'm going to assign it the water plane like that. Now, if I hold Shift down while moving things, I can move very slowly. And you can see as I move the water down, this is showing me my water level. And I could rename this, and I could send this straight into Unity with all my other meshes, and that would become my water plane. To rename that, because right now it's just got to name it inherited when we separated those vertices out. To rename it, you select it in F2, and then you can just name it water plane hole. I don't even know which hole I'm on, but I'll just say hole 1. And now when you export FBX files and bring them into Unity, that will come in with all your other meshes. Now you can see, you know, we were trying to do a little area of weeds that sticks up here. We kind of didn't get it high enough. I'm going to select some vertices and go back there. Now we're going to go up and down. We can see how high do we need to make that for it to open, hit the open water. So if we wanted a little island, that's how we do that. If we want it to stay below the surface, we can know exactly where our plane will be. We can keep it low and just plant weeds. So that's a very fast way to create lake depth and precision inside of Blender, instead of doing the messy and imprecise terrain tools in Unity. Now, as nice as it is to have control over it like that, something like that could be pretty easily done with one of those recipes. It's not too different from an automatic procedure you could set up and use over and over again. But what can we do to make this more interesting? Not every course has, well, very few courses have perfect edges to their lakes. Even the ones that are well maintained, there's going to be some variation, and that can add a lot of interest. So an easy way to do that would be make sure you select any mesh that is touching it. In this case, I'm just going to be safe and grab that one as well. And I also have, well, I don't have a blend, so I just have to have my base and that. Now if I go into vert mode now, and there's a few things we can do here. I can go to overhead, which is with the 7 key, and I want to add just some ripples, some little imperfections. This is totally random grabbing verts. I'm going to grab some up and down, on perimeter, within, up and down. The key here is I'm staying on one direction, just one line. Like I don't want to go around this curve, because what I'm going to do is from straight above with proportional editing, I'm going to do G to move and make a very small influence. And now if I move things just a little bit out like that, now if I take a look at this from the side, I've added just a little bit of waviness. Then I could go back in, I could grab a different set of kind of random vertices. I'm going to go down low, and I'm going to use G, but only in the up and down influence here. Up, down, which way do I go? I go down. And I've just created that quickly, just with random selections, a little bit more interesting water edge. Maybe I went a little more aggressively than I needed to, but it's still pretty interesting. Now, this brings up a good spot to show you why I like loops, why I might add a custom 4 around this. Can you see the shapes I've created by moving those up and down specifically? You can see, because I have wireframe here, that I have triangles of edges instead of squares like you would have with a loop. So what does that give me when I move up and down? I get these radiating elevation lines, right? And honestly, if you're just doing small movements in game, that's going to look pretty unnoticeable. It's not going to be a big deal, but I don't think it's as natural, which is why if you had a custom 4 and denser edges and vertices in this area, you'd get a better look. I could do that by going, I'm going to combine these for now. And I'm going to take, let's see, I'm going to need to combine it. I'm not teaching you to combine meshes right now. I just want to give an example of how this could look if you had more dense vertices. So these are all one shape now. If I were to delete out, this is all one big rough shape right now, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this loop. Yeah, it doesn't like it for some reason. Oh, it's got these weird vertices. I'm going to pause and clean this up quick, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to work on. Alright, so I have combined all vertices. I have a nice loop all the way around my lake. I'm going to slide these. G, G, slide it up, and I'm going to throw in a bunch more loop cuts. So essentially, that would be the same as if I had this kind of custom 4 other mesh surround. That's why I add them, so that I get more dense geometry. So now, if I were to, let's separate this out again. So now, if I have a lake bed mesh that has a lot denser geometry like that, and I want to do some of these tricks with adding some extra detail in. To add detail, you need more detail in the mesh. So if I select some random stuff and I do that, and then I grab a few like this, oh, I forgot to grab that one as well. I don't want to accidentally separate anything. Alright, I've done the same operations but with denser geometry, and you can see that when I'm moving things, whether I'm going up and down or I'm trying to do something like this, it has a lot more natural flowing geometry. the mesh that results is better because it doesn't have those built-in triangles, right? And it also allows me to, if I grab this, if I hide that, I could smooth this. I don't want to smooth the outside one. I could smooth this a little bit and it will make it even more natural. So now I've added just a little interest to my lake edge. You can also create areas that are sharper. Let's look underneath our water plane. Actually, let's just hide our water plane. So we know our water level is about right there. We can also create sharper bankments and areas where the bank is higher. And if we take the loop that is right below where our water line is, we could just drop, without that, we could drop it and create a sharper area. Easy to create something a little steeper. You could do it in just certain areas by selecting what you wanted to drop, using our circle key, and then you hold down Control, and if you paint over something it will deselect it. So if we only wanted to work on one certain area where maybe the bank is a little steeper, we're just going to take that one spot and make it steeper right there. And the other thing you can do is, if you use the Alt S, so S is scale, so if we do S, it's going to make things bigger, but it doesn't always work. If you look at it from above, it's a pretty round shape, but let's look here. If you scale, sometimes things don't go exactly as planned using scale, but if you use Alt S, it's a shrink and fatten. It will do it based on normals and it'll go straight out. So if you look above, what I'm doing is Alt S will basically do the same thing, but it's going to move all these vertices straight out and kind of collapse them. And if you take them like underneath, you could create an overhang, but it allows you to make something much steeper like that. And then you want to check, sometimes it raises and lowers things when you use that command. So you want to come down here and check, make sure your water level is staying about right, like this. All right, brought our water plane back, and I'm going to zoom in over here. So you can see we have an interesting water edge that is bumpy and cool, steeper right there, not as steep over there. Maybe this side of the lake is not specifically cared for in a pristine way. Maybe if it's shallower over there, the way you would make something, I don't even know what that is. If you want to make an area shallower, you can simply grab a bunch of verts, starting with some that are on the topmost area and then going down into the depths. And if you right click and O to smooth it, and you crank this up using all three of these, it's going to give kind of a flattened out. Looks like I missed a couple I probably want to grab up here. So now we have a very shallow entry over on that side. So we have a shallow side, and we have a steep side. Just a couple options. All right. Now that we have a model though, we need to talk about how we're going to vert paint that. So let's take a look at how we blend if we don't have a blend shape. All right, before we paint, you'll notice that if you're really paying attention, you'll notice I screwed up on the last one and I had meshes overlapping and separated. Just kind of messy work because I was moving too fast. So I redid this really fast, took like 2 minutes. Back to where I was, got one mesh base shape up against rough. So I'm going to go into my attribute to look at vert paint. The first thing you're going to notice, I'm going to hide the plane. All the vert paint that this came with is messed up. Why? Because anytime you move around vertices manually, when you do modeling, things like that, it distributes the vert paint and it stretches it and makes a mess of it. So vert paint's always going to be the final thing you do. So now that we're happy with our shape, the way I set up my materials, I almost just always use black as my default for what I'm going to set up as a rocky bottom, or mud or sand or whatever the base of your water is actually going to be, where nothing grows, where you don't want 3DG, you don't want anything like that. So my first step in as far as paint goes is I would fill the whole thing black. Right? Now, in my mind, I usually set it up so that a green channel, if I paint it green, that's going to match my regular rough. And if I happen to also have, I don't think this one does, there's a custom 4 over here, which is not too important, but probably going to be a rough as well. Might be actually like I think that might be like a mulch area. But I would set up, the only shape touching this water is regular rough. So I would have green as my vert paint all the way around, and that is the channel I would set up to match. So pretty easy, right? I'm gonna probably do, just kind of look and see, it's probably gonna be the first couple of loops, maybe even 3 loops, maybe more, that you want to have as your green, right? That's gonna be touching the rough. Now, you can set up any color to be any material. If you look at I think I did a video, I think it covers it in the CE workflow video. But if this was going to be this side where that custom 4 mesh is, I can see the outlines of it here, you would want those edges to be something that matches that. So in this case, it doesn't really matter. Usually I would use blue as deep rough. That's just in my brain, that's the way it works. So maybe I just want to do red. It doesn't matter as long as you set it up appropriately. But now I've already got the basics done. And then if I unhide my water plane, it's also going to unhide my course plane, which I'm in terrain, so I have to hide that. All right, so there's my water plane, which doesn't have a vert color. Let's go back to material. So now if I look at my vert colors, remember, anywhere green, it's going to look exactly like this rough. That's going to be our match. So we've got rough right now growing right in. Maybe I don't need quite as much. Maybe I want to go one more up and make this black, which will be, we'll just call it, it's going to be our rocky, muddy bottom, right? Now the nice thing is, I didn't mean to hit that, sorry. The nice thing is, by adding a water plane in Blender, we can see if we have our vert paint kind of where we want it. But we're still going to want to use the vert painting tool in Unity to do the final touch-ups on this and stuff. This is a rather flat piece of land and a very flat single shoreline kind of water. But let's just entertain the idea that this was up against a hillside of some kind. So if this terrain over here was like this, right? And we decided that we wanted to, this grass line should go farther down, right? So I would still just paint it like that in Blender, and then I would bring it into Unity, and I would use the Unity vert painter after my water plane's in there, and I would use that big brush, and I would paint in green just wherever it looks appropriate down to there, unless you wanted this to be a muddy shoreline. You might also have a situation where, let's see, we're going to grab, it's kind of hard to grab our water plane. I'm going to try and get, whoops. All right, so I have my water base selected. You could also have somewhere where, let's do it this way, the water level just happens to be low. Maybe sometimes it's higher. maybe your water edge looks cut like that, but you want your water plane lower, like it's a drought time of year, or the water just happens to be lower than it could be at its maximum. That would be a very realistic look as well. In that case, you'd probably still want your rough to end and have some exposed muddy areas, but it could be fun to go into Unity and paint some grass kind of growing down or things like that. You could drop some sticks and rocks in the shore like that. That'd be kind of a fun look. But by adding the plane and doing your vert paint that way and all your digging in Blender, it gives you a much better representation of what your final look is going to be. And you can use the precision tools in Blender to get exactly the looks and the heights of your water you want and know exactly where to model and how to dig and where to paint. All right, let's pull this into Blender, let's pull this out of Blender. Let's get into Unity, take a look at finishing it up. All right, so looking at this area, there are no materials yet applied. This is in Unity, obviously. Now, if you remember, the first thing we did is we took this blend and we combined it to our water. So our water base is actually going to contain this information, which means we can just delete this out of our scene. All right. Now I'm going to go back to Blender and I'm going to export my rough, my new water shape, and my water plane that I created, and I just named it water plane 1. You can see up here. So I'm going to grab all 3 of those, go down here, and I'm going to export them, and I'm going to pause and pull them into Unity. All right, it's updated in Unity. You can see the new shaping is in, but the water plane is not. That's because it wasn't originally in scene. It's a new object. So we have to go find it in here. It's going to be W, so it's going to be below all the splines. Water plane 1. If you just drag it anywhere into that folder, it'll just add it in there. Looks to me like we have the normals backwards. So let's go take a look. Click face orientation. Looks all right. I'm not sure why we're not seeing that. Let's explore. Oh yeah, we are. It's just blue. You can only see it. It's blue. All right. Now technically, do we need that water plane? We do not. It's kind of our reference for a certain height, but we could just use a regular water plane. And in this case, because it's a pretty round shape, that might actually be easier. Well, that's far too large, isn't it? All right. We're just going to use a built-in plane. I think that's going to be the simplest way, but we'll keep our plane in Blender as our reference, and we could use it, especially if we had a very strange shaped lake. All right, there we go. Looks good. All right, now to applying materials. If you had applied materials the way I do in my workflow video, this would already be done. In this case, I was working on just small parts of this course at once with someone else. So I didn't even bother going through and adding anything and everything. So, but I can just drag things in for now. Now I don't have a water base material yet, so I'll have to create that. I could create from scratch, or I could just copy something and start from that. I'm gonna add a water color to my plane. So now I just drug a water onto my water plane. And for now, I'm going to just Control D, duplicate my rough, and call that water base. All right, I'll throw that on there. Now I need to set up my blends. So I said that I was going to use green to match that. So I'm going to use the channel editor, and I'm going to go my new water base and my rough. I'm moving I want to copy the red vertex paint of the rough over to the green, which is what we painted the outside of our water base there. All right, and then for the water base itself, for the black color, we're going to go over here and we're going to figure out what detail index gives us something that looks like a water base. Cycle through these until I like that rock one. That is, you can see you can just cycle here. That's number 18, I believe. Yep. I am going to take out the color, darken it up just a little bit like that. And then, I mean, there are so many options in here for things you can do. Get the base a little darker. I'm going to take, if you want to have it be like red or clay versus gray stone, I'm going to leave it pretty gray as stone. I'm going to turn up my normal strength because I want those rocks to pop a little bit and try and match that distance. If you want it to be bigger rocks, it's the detail tiling. So if I go down, it makes small rocks. If I go that way, it makes bigger rocks. I wouldn't go too huge. It's going to start looking a little pixelated. But if you have a bigger stone bottom, let's go somewhere in that range like that. You know, over here we have the water plane. There's a little, like some of that exposed edge going on over there. The reason this water doesn't look very good, it doesn't have a reflection probe. A quick way to do that is we're going to find, where did it put our water plane? It put it right here. I'm going to name this water plane 1 so I can find it. And I'm going to right click and do light reflection probe. Change it over here in the inspector to real time. And you can change your resolution a little. I wouldn't go too much above 256. Maybe if you only have a couple of probes in your scene, you could go higher. I think 256 works great. You don't want things to be too crisp. It makes getting reflections correct more difficult. Now, in this scene, there's really nothing for it to reflect. We have no trees, we have no vegetation, we don't even have a sky. I tend to bump these up just a little, and then I usually make it tall. I find that works best. I usually go at least 50 tall or so. I find it easier to dial things in. If we change our sky to something that's at least a little bit more, has some clouds in it, we might get a reflection of that at least. That one. All right. Now you can see the probe didn't update. It's on awake. So when you hit play, or if you change this toggle it, the reflections will come back. So now we're seeing our reflections. Much better water. So just like that, we've got our water edge, and we have our blending. We have a nice clean edged water. And again, any of those techniques we used to model can make this, like we could go over here. I didn't do this when I remade it. I didn't make this a smooth transition. You know, you can make it shallower over there because this just looks like somewhere that doesn't have as pristine an edge. It's just shallower over there. So that's an easy change. You know, we go back into Blender and turn off that. So if we go over here, so in engine, in the game engine, our water plane is lower, right? So we can either go in here, we just only want to affect this. We want to deselect our outside loop because we don't want to accidentally separate anything. But the easy way to make this a shallower transition into the water is to select that and right click O to smooth, and then crank this up a bit like that. Now it's still got a little bit of a sharp edge up here. The only way to really get rid of that would be to combine these shapes. So you could do, I'm going to select, now I don't want to lose my naming, so watch carefully. If I temporarily want to combine two shapes so that I can smooth across them, what I would do is I would click this shape, I'm going to hit F2 and it gives me the name of the shape. I'm going to copy that because I want to be able to rename this. If I then click this and then the second shape that I shift click is my rough, and then I do my join maneuver, it's all going to inherit that second shape's name. So the rough is not going to change names, okay? get everything. I'm going to do my merge by distance. Now this is one big shape. I'm going to come in here. Now if I come in and I grab vertices that are across what looks like two different shapes, it will allow me to smooth things without them separating. So right click and smooth now, and I'm going to get a much smoother transition like that. Now if I go to face and I select a face that is still, if I go off vert paint, you can see it retained its material. So first, before I do that, I need to fix this weird sharp edge here. I'm just going to do a couple slides so that where it goes from a steep transition to a smooth one, it's not so abrupt. There. Now, in edit face mode, because of that material, I never removed it, I can click on that, do Shift G, select by material. Now all the faces of the water base are selected. I can P, separate selection. Now when that's separated, it brought with it a new name. It's not reverting back to its old name. You can see up here it's still called Spline Rough, but it added a 001 because it inherited the name from the shape it was joined to. That's why we copied. So if we hit F2 and we paste the original name back in, now it has its original name, so that when we go and export, and I'll pause and update, when it updates in Unity, you should see that smooth out. So now it's smoothed out there. You might want to go, like I would go back in and I would refine this transition right here, right? I wouldn't make it so it looked unnatural like that. I'd come back in and I'd smooth it out. I just basically do my smoothing farther along here. And now this is where I was talking about you can go in and finish the job with your Unity vert paint. So you can see I went back to Blender. I added just a little more interest and cleaned up this point that I'd made with a little more shallow sloping in. And I added just some additional interest over here. Same techniques, just some bumping up and down, a little bit of variation, a little bit of extra depth in some areas and around the corner there. And just to finish this off, take a look at how we just quickly and simply can use vert paint within Blender, or I'm sorry, vert paint within Unity to complete the look, kind of. It's fine as is. I like to do a lot of vert painting, obviously, in Blender, but there's really no replacing the vert paint tool in Unity. It can do softer blends. You can very carefully adjust just how much flow and influence you have, things you can't really do in Blender. You can't truly paint when you're in Blender, so it's much easier to do things in here to get them really precise this way. So if you remember the way we set this blend up, we have green on the edges that matches our rough. So if I wanted to paint green down this slope a little further, I would take this brush size just a little smaller, play with this. I would probably go a little stronger because grass is going to take over a little bit more. You can see I don't know that I have this smoothed out. I don't know if I have this slope smoothed out quite enough to make this convincing, because even if I paint grass on here at full strength, it looks a little unnatural simply because there's kind of a definitive line right here. If I were to smooth that a little more in Blender, here, let me pause and do that so I can show more accurately what I'm going for. Alright, so one more time I went back to Blender, I smoothed this out more, so I liked the way it looked before. I liked it a lot, probably more, but just to show you some of the options here. So, you know, you've got a sharp edge here where clearly grass would not be growing. Water, you know, can be up higher, and there's left behind rock, and that looks really nice there. But over here we have a different type of water entry. It's more shallow. You can see the shape is all the way out to there. That's the water shape, the water base. So now when we do what I was talking about as far as painting inside here, grass, you know, maybe you want to do that all the way down almost to the water line, or even, you know, into the water line, depends on what you're going for. But now it's more convincing if we do that. It looks a little more natural as we paint down grass to our water line. So there we've got kind of both styles. And if you happen to have painted this deeper in Blender, so you've got grass, you can see all the way out into the water there, you just do the opposite. You can take your black, I would go all the way up because rock is going to kind of eclipse things, and you would paint that like that. And doing it here is going to give you an extra layer of precision. You know, you can shape your edges and get your base paint in there in Blender, but once you have your real water and reflections in there, you can precisely put that stuff where you want it. I keep saying precise. Clearly that's something I am. All right, so there you go. Water Bases 101, a little more advanced in Blender, using Vert Paint in both places, using the channel editor to match your materials so you can blend without a blend shape. And you can see without that blend shape, you have a lot more ability to paint. If that blend shape was in here, you've got that skinny strip, you've got one quick transition, right, from rough to rock. You can't do this gentle and optional areas of Vert Paint if you have a skinny blend shape. You need more space to paint. And I think that amount of control is what's going to give you something that stands apart a little bit. All right, next video will be on creeks. Very similar, hopefully a little shorter. Yes, they are much more difficult, but they use many of the same techniques. So I will kind of gloss over some of the basics, and we'll look at how to make those look cool as well. Thanks for watching.